Yeah, good evening, Kevin.
You tweeted today that there has been a case of some kids getting charged with the killing of other kids. What are we talking about? Did you tell me that you thought as many as 30 kids may have been killed by other kids in the very recent times?
Well, since New Year's Eve up until today, I think there's in the region of 40 children have been arrested for murder, firearms offences, and attempted murder, and other very serious crimes, which normally attract a sentence of life imprisonment if an adult was committed it. On New Year's Eve, there was a dreadful stabbing, although there's never a nice stabbing, in Oxted, Surrey. 10 children were arrested for it. The following day or so in Reading, apparently a 13, 14-year-old girl, so I understand, enticed a boyfriend or a previous boyfriend to a location and had gone on social media, which attracted some supporters. They're the brief facts. That young lad was stabbed to death. 7 more children were arrested. That's just 2 alone in a very sort of short period of time, within a very short distance of about 20 miles.
So 40 kids over the last, we're not even at the end of the month, and 40 kids have been charged with murdering other kids. This is not normal, is it?
Well, they haven't been charged yet. Some have been charged. Many have been released on bail and are waiting for further inquiries to be carried out. So theoretically, if they are all charged with the crimes for which they were arrested, and normally you've got some pretty good evidence to arrest somebody, there could be anywhere up to 40 to 50 children within the next 4 weeks being charged with murder.
And that's not normal, is it?
No, it isn't. And when you think about lockdown, certainly has caused a lot of frustration, a lot of anger with some children that are used to going out and about. What my main concern is, and I'm sure the police service, is this: what happens perhaps in April or May when the lockdown comes or is reduced dramatically and everybody's allowed back out? There aren't enough police officers to cope before the pandemic. How are we going to cope with this influx of children that believe that they can carry knives and, in a few cases, guns and go out and kill people? These are children, 12, 13, 14, 15 years of age. They have to aspire to more than carrying knives and going out and wantonly killing fellow children.
Yeah, you tweeted today that 4 children, aged between couple between 1 and 14 years old and 3 and 16 years old, have been charged with the murder of another 17-year-old child, or 17-year-old, who was stabbed at 9 p.m. last Tuesday in London. So that's just one incident. Now, we're not experts, we're purely speculating here, but adults are having enough trouble getting their heads around this extraordinary phase of history that we're going through. These lockdowns, these tears, this shutting down of society, closing of the schools. Grown adults, are having enough trouble mentally dealing with this situation. And the effect on kids must be catastrophic. They must be confused little people. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, they are. We need to go back, to be quite honest with you, Kevin, 10 or 12 years ago. That's where it all started. It's almost like a litmus paper at the moment. Over the past decade, I'm not a politician, I'm politically homeless. The Conservative Party, they crippled the British Police Service. They reduced police numbers by almost 22,000, and tens of thousands of backroom staff were taken off of their work for the police. As a result of that, police service collapsed to its knees. They were unable to cope. And over the 10 years, the public have not seen the police when they're victims of crime, when really they should have done, and the police should be there for them. And what we've seen over this decade is less dealing with more. Now, when you've got children killing other children, the police have got to deal with that. And some of these children, Kevin, will not think twice about stabbing a police officer. This is what the worry is of me and the police service. And what I'm concerned about is this is the next generation. These children have got to give the next generation the best possible chance in their lives. I ask this question now. Where are the parents? Where are the role models? Where are the mentors? Where are community centres? And just going back that 12 years, just before I retired from the police service, I did interviews on programmes like yours, Kevin, and I said to the government, I can see knife crime getting out of control. You must invest in children. You must not close down community centres. In fact, then, before they started closing them down, Kevin, because I predicted that's what would happen, I said, please invest hundreds of millions in the future for the children, because the children give the next generation the generation that they start off with. What is going to happen? The next generation think that carrying knives, stabbing people, carrying guns, dealing with drugs, this cross-border drugs dealing that we deal with, if that becomes the norm and you haven't got the police service to deal with it, you have an entire society living in fear. And maybe some of the people that only feel safe are those that live behind gated communities. That happened in South Africa. I've never seen it happen in Britain. And when is somebody going to wake up, Kevin, listen, act, and smell the coffee?
Norman, are knives at the heart of the problem? Is it knives, or are there guns involved? And are we talking about kids who get involved in drugs gangs, or are we just talking about urchin-like kids, feral kids who hang out on the streets? Who are the culprits here?
Well, it's not just gangs. Obviously, gangs do play a big part in it. Social media plays a big part in it. What they do is they wind each other, singing their songs, but talking about jagging people, which means stabbing someone, and using certain lingo. What it then does, it provokes other like-minded people to sort of come back and challenge them. And what sadly happens is a lot of these gangs now are going out into the communities. They're even crossing from one gang area to another. And places like Enfield, Edmonton, Croydon, what happens is when you kill one of their gangs members, they then take retribution. Often it's weighted, but sometimes, like Edmonton, Enfield, if you kill one of the gangs over there, and I know a number of gangs over there, the retribution is very quickly. So getting back to the circle that we don't seem to be able to break, the police are chasing their tails. They've got an idea where the gangs are, but because there's, I think, in the region of 300-400 gangs in London alone, some up to 100 strong, how the hell do you keep an eye on them? The police and the security services are already trying to keep on the top people that we have worries about on terrorism. And the poor public are not getting the service that they need. And in rural areas, Kevin, many people live in fear. They don't see a police officer. They don't engage with the police officer. So we lose that relationship. We're not listening to them. We're not dealing with their concerns. So they feel abandoned. And that is what is happening. We have got a tsunami coming our way. We told Theresa May what would happen many years ago. She didn't listen. She accused the police service of crime wolf. Who is going to listen and act to what I'm telling you now, Kevin? Because this is what tens of thousands of police officers actually feel and know and see coming our way.
A couple of questions in the same question, Norman. Are we talking about older kids kind of inculcating younger kids into this vicious violent circle, that they pass on their violence to younger kids who then become older kids and on this vicious circle goes? And secondly, I shouldn't really ask two questions in the same question, but I'm doing it. What are the difficulties of the police when they have to deal with children? What are the difficulties of policing these kind of kids?
Well, in answer to your first question, a lot of it is like county lines now. You have got children walking around the streets, no hopes, no aspirations. They may well have been excluded from school. So they're seen by older children that have already been excluded and started getting involved in crime. When they see them wearing nice Rolex watches, driving nice cars, wearing top trainers and the rest of it, they then aspire to someone like that, because maybe some of these children have never been loved, they've never been nurtured, they've never been cared for, they've never been wanted. And as a result of that, they aspire to other like-minded people that were lost in life. So they are easily enticed into committing crime. What's it like dealing with children? We're not dealing with children really anymore, Kevin, as we used to know them 30, 40 years ago. We're dealing with young criminals. Some of these children, unfortunately, are psychopaths. I gave a lecture at once at Oxford Union about psychopaths in relation to Venables and Thompson that were involved in the murder of James Bolger.
Of course.
It was rare back then that anything happened. I'm now seeing psychopathic behaviour of children, and that is when they attack somebody, and you normally only can find out about psychopathy at an adult prison rather than a juvenile prison, young offenders institute. Hence, we couldn't define Venables or Thompson whether they were psychopaths. But psychopathy is where you inflict harm on someone else, and we're normally involved in a fight. You punch someone in the face and they fall over, and then you might punch them again. What happens now is when you continue to kick them when they're on the ground, you stab them not once, but 10 or 15 times. Now, if we've got psychopaths on the streets of London and Britain that have no fear of losing their life or taking anyone else's life, how could you deal with that as a police officer?
Do you think
they've got rights? They've got rights. They've got all of the rights on their side, which is absolutely right. But if we put them in institutions, are they going to come out better people or worse? And are they going to hate society like sadly some of them do? We have got to cut off the crime. We've got to cut off the fuel to the crime. And Kevin, you and I know you've not got much time now, but you and I have spoken about this so many times. I have for 20 odd years in the national media. I've pleaded with the establishment. I've been to number 10 Downing Street. I've put the plans together. You kindly gave us coverage recently about the Law and Order Foundation. That is about engaging with children, with communities, working together. The sort of thing I used to do when I was a police officer. It's gone. The public feel abandoned. Where are the police? Who cares about the victims? If you've been burgled, the public find themselves lucky if a police officer turns up. They should never be lucky. It should be their right. And here we are dealing with children, as we discussed and started this conversation off on this programme, 13 or 14 years of age, carrying knives, killing each other because they've got no values. When will someone wake up in the government and invest in children's future? Because if they invest in children and cut the fuel away from their crime, surely society can live much more safer than it can, rather than many communities now only travelling in daylight hours, fearing to walk the streets or travel on transport at night. That's how bad it is, Kevin.
Yeah, and this lockdown is only going to make things worse with all these continuing lockdowns. So I think you're exactly right, Norman. We've got a little crisis going on here that no one's quite noticed. Kids are killing other kids. Children are murdering children at an increasing rate, and something has to be done to stop this.